Cleopatra, the queen, who is immortal by history. She was born to ruling King Aulet in Egypt. She spent her childhood in the palace of Alexandria. Cleopatra learned many languages and was educated in philosophy, oratory, and astronomy. Her father, King Aulet, got many debts from the Roman, and he was hated for heavy tax burden, and people of Alexandria forced him to step down from the throne and leave Egypt. Berenice IV, who is the first daughter of Auletes, took over the throne after her father's throw-out. King Aulet took his daughter Cleopatra with him and travelled to stay in Rome. He got refugee at the villa of Pompey, the general of Rome. Pompey convinced the Roman governor Gabinius to help the king. Gabinius also accepted his request in order to collect back their loans. King Aulet and Cleopatra left the city and settled at Ephesus in Anatolia. During their time in Anatolia, they met Mark Antony, who was the officer of Gabinius. Cleopatra and Mark become friends. Roman helped Aulet to restore his kingdom after 3 years. 14 years old, Cleopatra also joined the Roman soldiers in the journey to Egypt. At the moment when they restore, they asked for their repayment. The Egyptian treasury was not enough for it, and he was put on pressure. After 4 years, Aulet announced Cleopatra as his co-ruler. King Aulet fell ill and died. Under Egyptian law, Cleopatra cannot rule the country without king, so she was married to her younger brother Theos Philippe to retain control and become the 18-year-old queen. Cleopatra enhanced the Egyptian economy by establishing trade with many Arab nations. She oversaw the construction of various temples to Egyptian and Greek gods. Egypt was very prosperous during her rule. She ordered to distribute royal granaries to people in the times of famine. She became very popular among the people. Cleopatra's face was also minted on coins, but at the same time, her married brother Theos Philippe's name was omitted in official documents, and his minister Pothinus influenced him to remove Cleopatra from throne. They forced her to get out from Alexandria. On the other side, Julius Caesar, who is the general of Rome, was on the war and stayed in Egypt. Cleopatra arranges to meet Caesar and explains about her disagreement with her brother. Caesar and Cleopatra became close and soon lovers, but he didn't officially make her as queen. Caesar decided to help her and gathered his forces to fight against Theos Philopator. Battle between them ended up when Cleopatra's brother tried to cross the river Nile and died. Caesar guided Cleopatra to marry her second younger brother Philopator to rule the country again. So she was married to her younger brother and became the queen. Caesar and Cleopatra's bond continued, and they gave birth to the child named Caesarion. Cleopatra and Caesar traveled to Rome with their son and stayed at the palace of Caesar. After 2 years, Julius Caesar was killed by his enemies in the ministers' meeting. Cleopatra was broken. She took his son and returned to Egypt. She had an idea of making her son the next king. So, she ordered to give poison to her younger brother. Philopator also died, and she made Caesarion as her co-ruler. Mark Antony is the relative and supporter of Julius Caesar, killed Caesar's enemies and leaded his forces. He liked to expand his boundaries, so he needed help from his childhood friend Cleopatra. He asked her to meet him at Tarsus. Cleopatra also arrived there, and Antony asked to support her financially and militarily. Mark Antony got attracted to Cleopatra and gave up his war and traveled to Egypt with Cleopatra. And he stayed there for months. Then Mark Antony left to Italy for an agreement with Octavian, who is Julius Caesar's adopted son. Mark Antony also agreed to marry his sister Octavia. Meanwhile, Cleopatra gave birth to Anatoly's twins, a boy named Alexander Helios and a girl named Cleopatra Selene. 3 years passed. Mark Antony disagreed to Octavian's activities and decides to work against Octavian. Cleopatra met him at Antioch and they got married there. Antony divided some portion of kingdom to Cleopatra in Rome, like Syria, Lebanon. This was not only illegal but also betrayal to Octavia. This made Roman people anger. This formed the war between Mark and Octavian. Cleopatra also gave birth to another son of Antony named Philadelphus. Mark Antony won some of the kingdom at battle and he arranges for a celebration. Mark gifted some of its part to their children. Caesarion was publicly declared as King of Kings. He gave few parts of Rome to Cleopatra, and he also decides to change the capital of Rome to Egypt. This disappointed Roman people. Mark Antony and Cleopatra lived together in Greece. Octavian forces begins war with Cleopatra and Antony. When war went on its peak, Cleopatra got panic and escaped from the battle. Antony's force surrendered, and he too escaped and joins Cleopatra in her ship. He got irritated on her for this incident. After several days he lose anger and stayed in Egypt with Cleopatra. The war continued in Alexandria. Antony got defeated. Cleopatra went to her tomb, which was made for her to get buried. Then message was sent to Antony that Cleopatra committed suicide. After hearing this, he killed himself with sword. Before he dies, he got another message that Cleopatra is alive. He rushed to her tomb and told her to go peace with Octavian and died. Cleopatra received message that Octavian will take her and her children to Rome and will keep them as prisoners. She decided to set fire to her tomb, but Octavian's force stopped her. Then she arranged a poisonous snake. While time, Octavian receives a message from Cleopatra to bury her near Antony's tomb. After hearing this, Octavian rushed to Cleopatra, but before that, she allowed the snake to bite her on her chest and ended her life at 39, the last ruler of Ptolemy dynasty, and it is told that they both were buried together by Octavian.